Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today I've got a brand new what if for Telltale's The Walking Dead. At the end of the first episode, you're faced with your biggest and most iconic classic choice in the game. Who do you save between two people? Sure, you chose between Sean and Duck earlier, but no matter what, Sean dies and Duck lives. But Carley and Doug is a different story. The two go on to live until episode 3, with some unique plot lines being thrown into the mix as well. But what if you didn't have to choose? What if Carley and Doug both survived the first episode? This one was highly requested, and we even got a member suggestion from Raven saying he wanted what if Carley survives. So I figured I'd do him one better since I already had this coming up, and we'll do what if Carley and Doug both survived. But before I do want to make it abundantly clear that saving these two from the initial death in episode 1 does not guarantee their survival throughout the entire series. I want to keep these videos as realistic as possible since I'm wanting to tell you what would happen first and foremost. It's a what if. So now that we've gotten that out of the way and you know that Carley and Doug could potentially die later, let's continue on. In order to make this work, we're going to slightly change the timing of the final choice for episode 1. Carley gets grabbed by the walkers, but Doug hasn't been grabbed yet. This allows Lee to give Carley the ammo, and then Doug gets grabbed, but luckily for him, Lee saves him. After they all leave and make it to the motor inn, Lee sees Carley and Doug talk briefly before hugging. He approaches them separately, and they talk about how they nearly died, thanking him for saving them. On top of that, they talk to Lee about their feelings for the other and ask for advice on how to proceed. Lee can either respond to this by telling them to go for it or to be careful. It's a new world and you never know what kind of issues a relationship might pose. No matter what, Carley and Doug still end up together by episode 2, as it's very unlikely Carley wouldn't just flirt with Doug anyway. The way she treats Lee in episodes 2 and 3 show that she's clearly very headstrong and shows her attraction very clearly. But with Lee, she had to get over Doug and develop it, whereas with Doug, she already liked him, so it makes sense why they'd be together earlier. And if Carley flirts with Doug, there's no way he's not caping immediately. It's Doug. However, this choice matters a little bit later, and maybe there's a line of dialogue from Doug and Carley about Lee's advice. Like if he said to be careful, they'd say, "I know what you said, but..." Or just thank him for his support if he was supportive. When it comes time to feed everyone, Carley refuses food, telling Lee to give it to Doug first. Doug also refuses, but after hearing that Carley wanted him to eat, he chooses to take the food. But once the St. John's proposition the group to check out their dairy, Carley goes with Lee, Kenny, Mark, and Ben, since she can defend herself pretty well. After the whole bandit attack happens and Mark is shot, the rest of the group shows up, with the exception of Carley and Doug. Ben can either stay at the motor inn or not, it doesn't really affect anything. The point is that our couple is getting their alone time. In the fight with Andy, Carley and Doug would return, with Carley aiming her gun to help Lee, but Doug tells her to wait, and instead uses his laser pointer to distract Andy. And if Lily doesn't shoot a rifle later on, then Carley will fire in her place. And that's pretty much a wrap for episode 2. In episode 3, there'd be no Carley/Lee romance for obvious reasons. Carley and Doug both being there would help kill the bandits and walkers easier, so the walker that bit Duck originally won't now. After leaving the motel, Carley defends Ben from Lily's accusation, and Doug defends her as well, which gives the wrong message as they're together, so they might have conspired together too. Carley tells off Lily, resulting in Lily trying to shoot her like she does in the canon events, but Doug pushes her out of the way and dies instead, like he does in his path. Now I know what you're thinking, isn't this what if Carley and Doug survived? And the answer is yes, but I did say at the beginning of the video that surviving their initial death event doesn't mean that they get permanent plot armor for all 4 seasons. Lily's anger would still build up, resulting in her shooting someone. Carley didn't dodge canonically, so there's no reason to believe she would here, and Doug got shot saving Ben, so there's no reason to believe he wouldn't if it was Carley. Plus, the changes made up to this point are already pretty big. Even now, Carley will live on to the foreseeable future, and so will others now that Duck isn't bitten. Maybe in the future I'll cover both of them staying alive to the end, but back to the story. Lee disarms Lily as Carley runs to Doug's body, crying his name. After Kenny, Lee, and Lily briefly trade words, Carley pulls her gun and aims it at Lily, preparing to shoot her as she yells at her. Kenny tells her not to do it as they don't need any more killing tonight. Carley's anger fades away, and she lowers her gun, getting into the RV. I don't see her being the type of person to just gun someone down like that, even if they did something horrible. Lee chooses to kick or keep Lily, but if he keeps her, Ben will have to watch her, since it's not good for Carley to do that. The group eventually comes across the train where Lee can talk to everyone. He checks up on Carley, and if you kept Lily, she'd wonder why he kept her around and mention that having Ben watch her instead of her was a good idea. She didn't kill her back then, but if she's faced with the opportunity for hours, she's not sure if she'll slip. Chuck joins the group, and they get the train working with Lily stealing the RV if you kept her around. Since Duck isn't bitten, a few changes changes occur, and they're pretty massive. For one, Chuck wouldn't have the reason to scare Clem about her death like he did. Instead, he would end up talking to Lee and suggesting he help her become more capable. The train also never stops, since they don't have to put Duck down, so they arrive at the bridge a lot sooner. Katja and Duck are also both alive now, which is awesome. And since they arrive at the bridge sooner, they wouldn't meet Omid and Krista, at least not as quickly, but the two do show up at some point while they are stuck there, so they'd still end up meeting the group and joining them. From there, they head to Savannah, and Lee and Kenny hear the stranger talking to Clem on the radio. After arriving, the group gets swarmed by walkers in the streets of Savannah, and while having Carley there definitely helps to secure the group, you have to keep in mind that the group is also now bigger as well. Because Katja and Duck are both here, they'd be Kenny's sole focus, and with him tripping and Cannon already having issues with himself, I don't think his attention's gonna be perfectly divided amongst everyone. So Carley is pretty much taking his role in terms of defending people. And because things are evened out, that means that Chuck still sacrifices himself to save Clem and gets left behind. The group makes it to a house, securing all of the supplies and finding a young walker in the attic. It doesn't have as much significance as in Cannon though, since Duck is alive, but Kenny might see it as what could happen to Duck. Kenny and Lee leave to go find a boat, but Carley goes with since she doesn't want to just sit around thinking about what has happened. She wants to do something to keep her mind off of Doug. But due to Katja helping keep an eye on Clementine, I doubt she would be able to sneak off, so she wouldn't be there when Molly shows up. This means Molly has no reason not to kill Lee if he loses against her. However, Carley and her gun are both present now, so she'd aim it at Molly to make her back off. From there, Molly reveals herself to be a girl and begins questioning if they're from Crawford, which prompts her to tell them what she knows about it. Since Kenny isn't on edge due to his family being alive and the fact that Molly has had a gun on her for longer, there's no need for him to jump up and shoot her from behind. This means Kenny doesn't fire a shot, which attracted walkers and Cannon. Here, Molly and our trio just trade information before Molly wishes them luck and leaves. They were unable to find a good boat, and with Molly saying Savannah was basically picked clean, it's not looking good. That is, until they return to the house to find Duck excitedly telling his father to come see what he and Clementine found. They follow and see a boat in the shed, which gets everyone hyped. After a look, Kenny notes that they need a battery and fuel, and Krista says Omid's injury is just getting worse. Seeing this, Kenny suggests they try and find Molly the next day and get her to help get supplies from Crawford. Katja brings up the fact that Chuck is still out there as well, and Kenny replies that they can look for him at the same time too. The morning arrives and Lee and Kenny venture out, waiting to hear some bells ringing to find Molly. Lee questions why Kenny thinks she'd want to help them, and he replies that he's not sure, but it's their only shot at maybe finding the stuff they need for the boat. As Lee, you can then say that he left out the fact that they need supplies for Omid's leg, or that they're supposed to be looking for Chuck too, but Kenny brushes it off, saying, yeah, that too. Here, he's really only thinking about his own family, which is perfectly in his character. At some point, they'd hear the bells and would follow carefully to find Molly. They manage to track her down, asking for help, with Molly asking what exactly is in it for her, to which Kenny replies that he can get her a spot on the boat. She was mentioning how much of a dump this place is, so getting out is probably a good idea. Molly doesn't seem to think this is enough, but her expression changes after a second, and she accepts this. Lee and Kenny are both surprised, and it hints that maybe Molly has some things hidden. They take Molly back to the house, and she helps them plan things out. She says she knows the entrance because she's scouted out Crawford before. This is a very risky plan though, as the people there won't like intruders at all. But at this point, it's our group's only hope. Molly, Lee, Kenny, Krista, Carley, and Ben are all going, with Clementine being a choice for Lee. But leaving her home is more of a reasonable choice this time, since Katja and Duck are there. So she'd at least have more company than a sick and dying Omid. And if he did turn, maybe Katja could deal with the walker. Anyway, our group makes an attempt to sneak past some Crawford guards at night, only to find out that they're walkers. They make it inside, quickly seeing the place was overrun, which actually makes things easier for them. They don't have Vernon or Bree to guide them, but Molly knew where the meds would be, and if you don't ask about the battery, Lee will suggest the auto shop himself. So that crosses those two off the list, leaving just the fuel. They wouldn't have an exact idea, but Molly might know it'd be in a maintenance shed, or at least have a hunch. And if it's not like there's many places that scream fuel on the map, so it would probably be the first place they choose to look anyway. Without Bree, Kenny would have to go to the maintenance shed with Carley instead, which might be a bit slower since Bree knew stuff about Crawford and Carley does not. Krista goes to the nurse's office alone, but it's also theoretically the least risky job since it's in the same building they're already in. Due to Kenny and Carley taking a bit longer, Lee would just try and help Krista get the nurse's door open since both she and Vernon struggled. Eventually, Kenny and Carley show up, yelling for help, so Lee runs over to barricade the door from walkers. After that, Lee takes out the walkers in the hallway and helps Krista crack the code on the medical supplies. An interesting note with Ben would be that his guilt has been entirely swapped from Kenny to Carley. Kenny's whole family is okay, whereas Carley was framed in his place and Doug died because of it. So after getting everything they need and getting chased by walkers, Ben starts to confess to Carley what he did, and she becomes furious. After she defended him, after Doug defended him, and he died because he didn't speak up, they almost died because he made that deal. She's mad, but Kenny wants to focus on getting out of there right now, which is in stark contrast to Cannon, where he decides Ben is the bigger issue. But that's just the type of guy Kenny is. It was his family on the line before, and now it's not. She continues on, but Kenny uses that as the time to drop the bomb that the boat has limited capacity, so chances are with this revelation, Ben is gonna get left behind. He asks if that settles things, or if they just want to sit around waiting for walkers to break in. The others just stay silent and proceed to follow Kenny through the armory door as walkers start trailing them. Ben gets grabbed by the bell tower walker, and Lee is forced to either pull him up or drop him, with Carley briefly looking back to see what's going on. Either way, Lee makes it out of there and they return home. Katja and Duck are happy to see Kenny and Clementine back, but Molly and Ben are both determined on whether they're there now. Omid gets some medical care from Katja since she was a vet, and also basically the group's medic, so I think he'd survive the infection now that they've got the supplies. If you didn't leave or shoot Molly, then she would just leave the group like she did in the original story. Clementine asks Lee if they'll be able to find her parents, and regardless of his answer, she knows the truth and cries herself to sleep. Lee then drifts off himself, waking up to find Clementine gone. He checks outside, finding her hat and being bitten on the wrist by a walker before killing it. After this, everyone pours out of the house to see what the commotion was, and Lee tells them Clementine is gone. But without Vernon, their only leads are the stranger on the radio and the Marsh house, where Clem's parents were staying. This then becomes the obvious choice on where to look, even if it's a long shot. This is where Lee rallies the group to go with him, where some things are altered. Omid and Krista basically stay the same, only going with you if you revealed the bite or left Clementine at the house. Kenny will now join you regardless of Ben being there, since he doesn't really care about what he did, as it didn't affect him much. In fact, it just led to a psycho leaving the group. So as long as you have a good relationship with him, he'll go. Unless Molly and Ben didn't return from Crawford. This is because Katja wouldn't want Kenny putting his life at risk so much, so she'd convince him to stay with her, Duck, and the boat. As for Carley, she'd have her own friendship meter. The following determine whether she'll go with Lee. Telling Clementine your secret in episode 1, encouraging her to be with Doug in episode 1, giving Doug food in episode 2, revealing you're a murderer in episode 3, leaving Lily behind in episode 3, pulling Ben up in episode 4, and revealing your bite in episode 4. If you've managed to do 4 of these 7 things, Carley will join you on your quest to find Clementine. I know it might be weird to say that she'd want you to pull Ben up, but I think her anger would subside, and she'd feel super guilty about wanting Ben dead. She just seems like that kind of person. At least with Lily, she straight up shot Doug. Ben never intended for any of that to happen, and he's still a kid. Ben will try to join Lee no matter what, but it's his choice since he might consider him a liability or not want to stir things up with Carley if she's coming too. Although she is okay with Ben coming with, since they're trying to save Clementine together. And so Lee and his Chex Mix of a team head off to find Clementine, while the others stay behind. After a while of walking and fighting off walkers, Lee ends up passing out, which reveals the bite if he didn't already. They get him inside a building to avoid him dying, or if it's just Lee, he snuck past more walkers since it's easier alone. This means he's less drained, so he hides in a building before passing out. Some time passes and Lee awakens, and the group continues on. If there's more than one person with you, then someone from your group will go to ring a bell in order to keep the walkers away in case you pass out again. If not, you just keep going toward the Marsh house, with Lee telling the others to stay back as they all have lives ahead of them. From here, Lee goes on to battle it out against the Horde, finding his way inside in hopes of finding Clementine. Luckily for him, he meets the stranger, and things go exactly the way they do canonically. Sadly, Lee does die in the same way too, and Clem goes back to the house after being found by whoever went with Lee, if anyone did. The issue of the boat still presents itself though, as Kenny said it wouldn't fit more than 5 people, even if one of them was a kid. And here we've got 7 or 8, counting Ben. Kenny is still dead set on leaving with his family on the boat, but obviously he can't fit everyone else on. He wants to take Clementine with them since she's a kid and she's Duck's friend, but trouble arises when Krista, Omid, Carley, and Ben realize only one more person can fit if Clem goes. If Ben is there, they'd basically pass the spot up to him since he's a young guy and Kenny doesn't hate him. He just doesn't particularly like him either. Oh yeah, and if Ben isn't there, Carley wouldn't want to leave Omid and Krista behind alone, and vice versa. That pretty much means that Krista, Omid, and Carley are out of luck, and this is where your first choice as Clem comes in. The day Kenny and his family leave, she can make the choice to go on the boat or refuse staying with Omid, Krista, and Carley. And with that, Kenny, Katya, Duck, and potentially Ben and Clementine wave goodbye to their friends as they sail off, leaving the rest behind. But that is what if Carley and Doug survive. At least just part 1. We've got some more interesting changes coming with Kenny's entire family surviving, as well as Carley also still being alive, and the different paths that we just created here with Clementine. So if you want to see this series continue, please feel free to leave a like, comment, all of the awesome stuff that you guys do for the channel. And speaking of awesome stuff you guys do for the channel, let's give a quick shout out to our members. Kyler Fiend, Wax and Parrot Fish, Ellie the Plug 2, Paul Keen, Fonklocks, Hazy Brush, I Am Bored, Scintillating Susie, Roderick Hare, Marco DeCinco, and Prince Raven. Thank you so much for suggesting this and also becoming a member for the rest of you guys. And if you want to get access to awesome perks like early video uploads, exclusive community posts, and other things like that, feel free to become a member for only $2.99 a month. It shows your support with the channel and helps me want to create more content for you guys. But as always, tell me if you like this part, tell me what you think will happen next, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.